Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at a collection of sources that detail a truly tragic and widely reported case from Washington state in 2025. The material covers the loss of the three Decker children and the massive manhunt that followed for their father, Travis Caleb Decker.
And we should say right at the start, we're approaching this material with the deepest respect for the victims. For Peyton, who was 9, Evelyn, 8, and little Olivia, who was just 5, our mission here is really just to synthesize the information, to lay out the reported facts, the timeline as we know it from the sources without adding any, external judgment.
Exactly. That's the core of what we're doing. We have a kind of factual roadmap here. It outlines the father's background, which is complex. It also lays out the precise sequence of the disappearance and the discovery, the huge scale of the manhunt, and then, of course, the resolution 3 months later.
And this examination is really designed to give you, the listener, a clear and structured understanding of how complex an investigation like this is, especially, and this is key, when law enforcement is trying to track a fugitive who has specialized survival and evasion training. So we're really focusing on clarity here as we go through these difficult facts.
Okay, so let's start with the background. The profile of the father, Travis Caleb Decker, it presents a very stark contrast to what ended up happening.
It does.
He was 32 at the time, born in August of '92. He grew up in a suburb of Milwaukee, Pewaukee, Wisconsin.
And the sources really spend a good amount of time on this early life because it establishes a baseline for his capabilities. He graduated from Pewaukee High in 2010, and the reports all highlight this history of athletic excellence. He played JV and varsity football.
But wrestling was his main sport, right?
That's right. Wrestling was where he really excelled. He even made it to the Wisconsin State Finals in the year he graduated. And this establishes a history of discipline, of physical fitness, and, the ability to operate under a lot of pressure.
There was an account from a former neighbor who described him as extremely athletic and also remembered him as a kind teenager. It's jarring to read.
It is, and the sources also point to a pattern in his family. His grandfather was reportedly in special forces, and Decker followed his own father into the military. So you see this lifelong exposure to, and maybe an expectation of, a certain kind of high-level physical and mental discipline.
And that military service is where the profile becomes so critical for understanding what came next.
Absolutely. The extent of his military career is detailed pretty extensively in the accounts we have. He served as an infantryman, U.S. Army, and Army National Guard from March 2013 to July 2021. So that's almost 8 years of service.
And that included active deployment, a 4-month tour in Afghanistan in 2014. What kind of specifics do the sources give us about his training? Because that seems to be what really concerned the authorities.
The specifics are very illuminating. He was in the Washington National Guard from 2014 to 2016 as an automatic rifleman. And the sources specifically name his affiliation with the 75th Ranger Regiment at Joint Base Lewis McChord.
Okay, so for those who don't know, the 75th Ranger Regiment, that's not just any unit.
No, not at all. It's one of the U.S. Army's most elite special operations forces. The training is incredibly rigorous.
So he was a fully qualified Ranger. Did he complete the highest level of certification?
And that's where there's a crucial bit of nuance in the reporting. The sources are very clear on this. While he did serve with the 75th Ranger Regiment, he had reportedly been removed from that unit because he failed to complete Ranger School.
Ah, I see.
So what that means is he received extensive, high-level specialized training, things like small unit tactics, reconnaissance, advanced land navigation, all skills essential for survival. But he didn't get that final designation, that final qualification.
So even without that final step, his expertise was still significant. He had a whole toolkit of knowledge he could use for evasion.
Exactly. Even an incomplete experience in a unit like that gives you foundational skills in moving undetected through difficult terrain, finding what you need to survive. And his service didn't stop there. He later served overseas with the 503rd Infantry Regiment and the 173rd Airborne Brigade Combat Team in Italy. The point is, he was a seasoned infantry soldier, regardless of the setback with Ranger School.
And that detail, those special skills and training, that's what became the central fear for law enforcement. They were potentially facing a suspect who knew how to use the vast, rugged terrain of the Pacific Northwest Better than they did.
Precisely. Authorities expressed immediate and critical concern that these skills in infantry movement, camouflage, sustained survival would make him extremely difficult to find. This immediately elevated the search beyond a typical fugitive case. It became something closer to a military search and recovery mission.
But before we get to the actual timeline of the disappearance, we have to square this profile of a highly trained soldier with the man he was in 2025. The sources all point to significant personal instability. He'd been married for 10 years to the children's mother, but they divorced in 2023.
And here the picture gets, well, very complicated and deeply contradictory. His ex-wife's attorney acknowledged that Decker had mental health issues, but, and this is a critical point they stressed to investigators, there were no red flags.
No red flags.
None. They reported that he and his ex-wife communicated regularly, and the quote is, not just as co-parents, but as friends.
That is just shocking to hear. An active dad, friendly co-parenting. And yet at the same time, the reports say he was struggling severely. He was reportedly homeless, living out of his truck in the Wenatchee area, staying at campgrounds, motels.
It creates this profile of a sudden, catastrophic internal collapse that was, it seems, hidden behind a veneer of normalcy. The attorney also emphasized he was an active dad, with no prior history of violence toward his family at all. This really highlights how unexpected this was for those closest to him.
And the instability. Being transient, living out of his truck, that probably made him harder to track even before he was a fugitive.
It's a paradox, isn't it? That state of distress also meant he had very few physical or digital ties that he needed to sever. He was, to some degree, already operating off the grid.
And the sources also mentioned social isolation. His own brother, TJ, stated they had a falling out about a decade before and hadn't spoken since.
A fractured support system.
So you had this volatile combination. Specialized training, personal instability, homelessness, and isolation. That's the package investigators were facing.
Right. If you connect all those facts, you see a person who had the mental and physical tools for extreme self-sufficiency, honed over years of service, but at the same time was experiencing this profound personal crisis. And that contradiction is really central to the question of motive, which, according to all the sources, remains officially unknown.
Okay, now we have to move into the devastating timeline, the disappearance and the eventual discovery of the victims. This all begins on May 30th, 2025.
That was the last day the three girls were seen alive. Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia. Their father, Travis Decker, picked them up from his ex-wife at 5 p.m. It was a scheduled, standard visitation, part of their custody agreement.
And he was supposed to have them back just a few hours later at 8 p.m., but he failed to return them. And the sources say he gave no explanation, no phone call, nothing. That's the moment the case begins.
Right. That immediate breach of the agreement is the start of the missing persons case. And 3 days later, on June 2nd, the investigation escalates dramatically. Law enforcement in Chelan County, they discover his vehicle.
The white GMC Sierra truck he'd been living in.
Yes. They found it unoccupied, near the Rock Island campground. And this discovery, it instantly narrows the search area and provides the first critical clues.
And the initial examination of that truck, it provided the first real confirmation of violence, didn't it?
It did. Investigators found his wallet inside the vehicle, which is a key detail. A fugitive planning to disappear for good rarely takes their ID. And then, critically, a bloody handprint was discovered on the tailgate.
And then the worst possible outcome.
Tragically, yes. The subsequent search of the area confirmed everyone's worst fears. The bodies of Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia were found nearby.
The sources are, they're rightly circumspect with the details, but they do provide some necessary information to understand the level of premeditation.
Yeah.
The victims were found zip-tied with plastic bags over their heads.
And a preliminary examination concluded that the children had likely been killed by asphyxiation. That discovery on June 2nd, it immediately shifted the entire focus. It went from a missing persons inquiry to a massive criminal manhunt. And Travis Decker was instantly the prime suspect.
That transition must put immense stress on the entire system.
Absolutely. In just 72 hours, the case transforms. It's now a high-priority search for an alleged killer who they know has advanced evasion skills. This means federal involvement becomes necessary immediately.
So let's turn our attention to that manhunt. The sources characterize it as being on an unprecedented scale. The search for Decker became officially recognized as the largest in the county's history.
And that initial response, it wasn't without some controversy, according to the reporting. The Washington State Patrol faced some criticism for not issuing an Amber Alert right away, even though the Wenatchee police had requested one earlier.
But even with that initial issue, authorities were gathering digital intelligence very quickly, and it pointed strongly to premeditation and a plan to flee.
It did. A deputy U.S. Marshal with the Pacific Northwest Violent Offender Task Force provided details from an affidavit. And this affidavit had a critical digital evidence from Decker's Google account.
And what did that show?
It was a chilling look into his mindset in the days right before the murders. His account was used for specific searches like how does a person move to Canada, how to relocate to Canada, and jobs in Canada.
Wow. So these aren't just casual thoughts. This is planning.
Exactly. It indicates a specific, calculated intent to flee the country and start a new life. And that implication that the act was premeditated and the escape was planned, when you couple that with his physical skill set, it just confirmed the severity of the threat.
And this is where his military background becomes so central to the entire manhunt strategy.
It's paramount. The Chelan County Sheriff's Office publicly noted that Decker was, and this is a quote, well-versed in outdoor survival. They also knew he had previously lived off-grid for up to almost 3 months. This knowledge let them immediately bypass standard search protocols. They knew where he would likely go.
Into the wilderness.
Into the vast, rugged terrain. That combination specialized military training, a proven ability to live off-grid for long periods, and the digital evidence of a plan to flee, it made locating him exceptionally challenging from the very start.
So law enforcement was facing a suspect who was not just prepared for, but probably psychologically accustomed to a long period of evasion in a very harsh environment.
If you think about the operational reality of that, it means standard search techniques. Checking roads, checking towns, they're likely to be futile. The search has to focus on difficult, remote areas, high elevations, heavy forest cover, the exact places where his military training would be most effective. And that immediately raised the resource requirement to a massive multi-agency effort.
So the manhunt very quickly expands beyond Washington. It pulls in federal agencies, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, and crosses state lines into this huge network of wilderness in the Pacific Northwest. And this brings us to the long, frustrating summer of 2025.
The first phase was really characterized by intense scrutiny of any possible sighting, especially in remote areas. The first major lead that stretched the search came on July 5th. So just over a month after the girls' bodies were found, law enforcement agencies started searching Idaho's Sawtooth National Forest.
And that was based on a tip.
Yes, a tip from a family who believed they might have seen him in that area. And this expansion just shows how quickly authorities recognized he could travel far and fast, and that he would exploit these remote wilderness areas hundreds of miles from the crime scene.
Which has to be a logistical nightmare. Coordinating multiple agencies in 2 different states, deploying teams into that kind of terrain.
It's a monumental challenge, tracking a skilled fugitive in a wilderness like the Sawtooths. The terrain is steep, visibility is low, and standard tracking methods are just easily defeated by someone using basic military evasion techniques. Moving off trail, using stream beds to hide tracks, traveling at night. The cost and manpower for that kind of search are immense.
And that first big lead, it resulted in a very high-stakes moment, didn't it?
It did. 4 days later, on July 9th, members of the U.S. Marshals Greater Idaho Fugitive Task Force located a hiker who matched Decker's general description. For a moment, there was a real belief that they had him.
But it's a false alarm.
A false alarm. This kind of misidentification, it's not uncommon, but it severely impacts your resources. Time, effort, helicopters, ground teams, all diverted. The search in Idaho was called off later that day. It was a dead end, and it forced a complete reassessment of where to even look next.
And the search, it seemed to face these constant psychological blows. So much effort for no result. And then there was another significant delay back in Washington.
Right. On August 28th, so we're nearly 2 months later now, investigators discovered bones during a ground search in Chelan County. And this is one of those moments where, hope and dread just collide. It required another major operational pause. All searching stopped to preserve the scene.
And they had to wait for forensic analysis to see if the remains were human, which would have brought the search to a very somber end.
Exactly. And the community, the search teams, everyone was just held in suspense for over a week waiting for that news.
Only for it to be another dead end.
The results came back on September 3rd. The bones were confirmed to be from an animal. And that detail really just underscores the slow, meticulous, and often frustrating nature of these searches. A whole week was consumed by that verification process, only to learn the search had to go on.
You can just feel the toll that must have taken on everyone involved.
Absolutely. For 3.5 months, Decker successfully leveraged his skills against traditional law enforcement methods. He forced these continuous, expensive, high-risk ground searches over thousands of square miles.
In that protracted search, it finally came to a definitive close in late September of 2025. The breakthrough came on September 18th, about 3.5 months after the girls disappeared.
That's right. Human remains were found south of Leavenworth, Washington, and the location is critical. It was still in Chelan County, but in a remote area, which was consistent with the initial assessment of where he would go off-grid, into the mountains, away from any established roads.
And after that discovery, things moved very quickly.
They did. Just 6 days later, on September 24th, the U.S. Marshal Service officially declared Travis Decker deceased. And this was even before the final DNA confirmation was complete.
Which suggests they had a high degree of certainty from evidence found at the scene.
It does. Things like clothing, personal effects, something that allowed them to close the operational phase of the manhunt while they waited for that definitive forensic proof.
And that definitive proof came the very next day, September 25th. DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Travis Decker, officially closing the 3-month manhunt.
And then came the final, somber investigative detail. It was released by the Chelan County coroner on September 26th. He announced that due to the advanced state of decomposition, a full autopsy to conclusively determine the time and manner of Decker's death would be impossible.
So that detail is critical for the final record. The manhunt is over, but the official circumstances of the perpetrator's final moments are and will remain ambiguous. The case is closed with 4 deaths: Peyton, Evelyn, Olivia, and the perpetrator. And the motive for the original crimes remains unknown.
So if we synthesize all of that, we really have a clear, structured understanding of this catastrophic series of events drawn directly from the source material. We can trace the timeline from May 30th, when the girls were picked up, all the way through to September 25th, when the DNA confirmation closed the case.
And our analysis has confirmed a few key things. First, the suspect's profile uses unique, contradictory mix of highly specialized military training and severe personal instability. And second, that specialized profile directly led to this exponential difficulty for law enforcement. You can see it in the huge resources they use across multiple states and the 3-month duration of the search.
So you now understand not just the basic timeline of this tragic case, but the investigative complexities that really defined it. The story of the manhunt itself is as much about the difficulty of tracking a specialized individual in rugged civilian territory as it is about the ultimate tragedy.
And that does lead us to a final thought for you to consider, built entirely on the documented facts of this case. If the suspect's extensive military training, his time with the Ranger Regiment, his known experience living off-grid, if that contributed so significantly to his ability to evade capture for 3.5 months, what does this case reveal about the necessary advancements in tracking and locating individuals who have these specialized survival skills, but in a civilian law enforcement context? The facts here seem to suggest a real capability challenge when a fugitive's skills are so perfectly adapted to the terrain.
It is a profound point for consideration.
It is. We appreciate you spending this time with us to explore these sources and to work through the complex facts of this event. Thanks for listening.